Today, I'm going to walk you through 3 questions that I always ask with every prospect that I talk to. I'm going to tell you why these questions work, why they're harder to answer than you would think, what to do with the silence that often follows, and how to handle it when there's more than one decision maker in the room. By the end of this video, you'll have a framework that you can use on your very next sales call. But before we go there, if you feel you need some help upping your sales game, schedule a call with me and let's have a chat. Now, let's get into it. The first question is what I call the magic wand question, and it sounds like this. Let's say that it is a year from now and everything has gone right. Can you share with me what that looks like from both a qualitative and a quantitative perspective? Notice the 2 parts here. So quantitatively is what do the numbers look like? So that's the ROI, or depending on what your business is, it could be things like close ratios or employee survey results, anything that can be measured. Qualitatively is more what does the day-to-day look and feel like? So it could be things like how are people working together and how is time being managed, or what are clients or employees saying about their experiences? Here's why I ask it this way. Most buyers have not been asked to talk about in such detail what that ideal state looks like. They know where they are right now, but they don't necessarily have gone into a lot of detail on what that future looks like on the other side of it. And I really want them to share that with me, but also almost to live it. It helps to remind them of the why and gets them excited about solving the problem or realizing the opportunity. So when you ask this question, don't be surprised if you get a pause, and sometimes a long one. And a pause is not a bad sign. In fact, that's where the work is really beginning. Now, your instinct is going to be to fill the silence by offering an example or by asking another question. Resist the urge and let them really sit in it and share with you what their vision is. If they give you a short answer, a follow on question goes a long way. Something as simple as, can you say more about that? Or what would the implications for the team be? But something that really helps them to continue down this path on articulating a future that they probably haven't articulated yet. And the quantitative part of the question here does a lot more work than just understanding the vision. It actually is giving you some insight into the value, the return on investment that the client is getting from your work, which will allow you to price according to your value. And in your proposal, provide that context so that all decision makers understand that. You're not pulling a number out of the air. They actually gave it to you. Question 2, the cost of inaction. This question is often harder to answer than it looks because the client hasn't really thought about it in that way. And if they have thought about it, they haven't named it or said it out loud. And they certainly haven't calculated the impact of the cost of doing nothing. I remember when a large financial institution had asked me for a proposal to train 100 of their sales force on a new investment product. And when I asked them this question, they sat with it for a minute and they said, well, we'd probably lose clients because the market was expecting them to offer this new product. And if they didn't, they would go to a competitor. And we all know the cost of losing existing clients. So it just reinforced for them the urgency to get the sales force up and running. Sometimes what surfaces in the answer here is financial. Sometimes it is employee morale, or perhaps losing employees or missing a deadline. Sometimes it's something that they haven't thought about until it actually came out of their mouth. Again, give this some space. And if you get a surface level answer, use the follow on question, something like, well, what would that actually cost you in terms of time or dollars? Or how would other teams be impacted if this did not get resolved? What you're doing with this question is you're getting them to articulate a stake that they may not have thought about before, or maybe they've been carrying it in the background as a worry. But when something gets stated, it becomes real in a different way than a background story. The third question is the success criteria question, and it's just simply, how will you know if this has worked? And it can be deceptively simple, and you may get initial answers such as, well, when our numbers go up, or when the team is feeling better about their work, or whatever it may be. Again, these are surface level responses, and you are going to be able to build a better proposal if you understand exactly what the metrics are so that your client can hold themselves accountable and hold you accountable as well. This is where your follow on questions matter most. What specifically will we be measuring? Over what time frame? Who would need to agree that this worked? The goal is to get to something concrete enough that you and your client can take a look 6 months down the road and see if, in fact, you have delivered. This sends a really strong message of confidence that you are so confident in your work that you are also holding yourself accountable to metrics. Now, here's where this framework gets interesting. In B2B sales, as you know, there are often multiple decision makers, and they may be in the same room with you, or you might be having separate discussions with them. And when you've got multiple people like that, something interesting happens. You get different answers, and that's valuable. One person's vision of success might be financial, another may be client retention, another could be about how it impacts his job. One person could have a stake that no one else had ever considered. Your instinct might be to see this gap as a problem. It's not. It's information and it's insight that your client probably didn't have before you had asked this question. This is where your role shifts. You're no longer just a salesperson selling a solution, but you are facilitating a conversation that needs to happen internally that the client didn't even know needed to happen. That's real value. You might say something like, it sounds like we're looking at this from different angles. Can we spend a little time here and dig a little bit deeper? You're not solving the problem for them, but you are helping them to gain clarity with you in the room. This is an incredibly valuable thing to a prospect because you're helping them to gain clarity. And that builds a certain type of trust that no proposal or pitch could ever do. So, long before you've even talked about your solution, you're already partnering with them in a different way. Here's the thing about asking these three questions. By the time you've asked all of them and you've given enough space for the answers, you know more about your prospect's situation than any competitor ever could. You know what success looks like to them in their own words. You know what's at stake if they don't resolve the issue or take advantage of the opportunity. And you know how they will measure the results. You haven't pitched anything yet, but you've teed up the close like no polished proposal or presentation ever could, because you are now reflecting back to them in their words what's most important to them. That's it. That's how you close B2B sales. I'm curious if you could drop in the chat, which of these three questions do you think would be hardest for your clients to answer? So let's bring this together. The magic wand question. 2 years from now, everything has gone right. What does that look like, both qualitatively and quantitatively? The cost of inaction question. What happens if this doesn't get solved? The success criteria question. How will you know it worked? Ask the questions and then give the silence room to do its work. Use follow on questions to go deeper. And when you're in a room with more than one decision maker, let the differences in their answers become part of the conversation instead of something to smooth over. If you'd like help building in some of these questions into your sales conversations, schedule a call with me and let's talk about your sales and where you are currently and what your aspirations are and see if it makes sense to work together.